And so, yeah, I'm ready.
Given the world we live in right now, everybody, or not everybody, but a majority of the people are working from home, or they've been laid off, unfortunately, or furloughed, and they're trying to create new income streams. And so, very, very broadly, what is the mindset that somebody should take on if they're looking to just kind of market themselves as the product so that they can earn clients and to start their own business?
Yeah. So just to back up a second, like there was a trend that was happening that I wrote about a year or two ago, just to kind of call my shot, that it's called the future of work. And I have a friend, she was a consultant for my business. She's a very accomplished, bona fide entrepreneur in her own right, and now has a fund, and is a venture capitalist and is starting another company. Her name's Julia, and she's an absolute force. She's only a year older than I am, but I look up to her immensely. And she goes to Bali like 2 or 3 months out of the year and lives in like a very modest little hut for like $200 a month, and lives off of like $200 a month in food or something like that. And, for pretty much pennies can exist. And after her last company, she did that with no income for a year and told herself that she wouldn't work in exchange for money. Like she would just help people and like kind of just recenter herself. Now she works for money and she's starting a company and so on. But Julia has told me these stories of these parts of Bali that have tens of thousands of people. They're like towns or cities almost, all filled with digital nomads, people that have started their own businesses, whether it's a consulting business or whether it makes some sort of a product that they sell online or that they drop ship. There are tens of thousands of people that are working 3, 4, 5 hours a day on their computers. And the rest of the day is like doing yoga and surfing and spending time with other like-minded people and like living a very wholesome existence. And that's a pretty extreme example of what's called the future of work. Less extreme is the statistic that 37% of workers are contractors today of the workforce. And I think that will be over 50% in the next 5 years. So over half the workforce won't work for a company in a conventional sense. They won't be sitting at a desk in an office. They'll be a contractor. They can come and go as they see fit. They can work from home. They can drive for Uber, you name it. And that trend has only, like, I think a lot of people are talking about this now because of COVID. Not to pat myself on the back, but I've been talking about this for years because we were going this way. But COVID is just going to completely zip this trend along, right? Because people are realizing like, I can just work from home. I don't have to commute all this time. I don't have to report into a boss. Another quick anecdote is I had a designer, one of my first employees, wonderful person, incredibly hard worker. And in the early days of the company, I paid her like 45 grand. It's all we could afford. It was a lot of money for me. And as she got better, she left a job that was paying her 55 grand at a big design agency. So she took a pay cut, but a small one, got equity in the company. And as she got better, I paid her 50 and 55K and 60K and 65K and so on over the years. She was at the company for maybe 3 years. She made our logo. She made like all of the initial software, anything design focused, tons of work, an app. And by the end, I was paying her like 100K, which is low for like a top of the line UI UX designer. But I was really stretching. That was a lot of money for the company. And she quit because startups are intense and she thought she could make more money and she wanted to expand her client roster. And I remember sort of resenting her at the moment because I was stretched so thin. I was paying her 100 grand and taking on all this risk as the employer. But she now makes 200 grand a year. She bills $100 an hour. She works 40-hour weeks with minimal stress. She has 3 or 4 or 5 clients at a time. She picks her clients. She has a boyfriend who worked as a developer at my company. They met on the job. actually working remotely. She was a contractor and he was a contractor. They were in the same city, but they never were in the same space. They fell in love over Slack. They're dating now and they travel a lot. So she'll just take some time off and either work from, Malaysia, or she'll just not take on clients for a little while and they'll take 2 weeks or a month. And he's a developer, she's a designer. And they have this sort of modern love story where they both make $200,000 or $300,000 a year doing what they're really good at. And they work for themselves. And I could never afford to pay her $200K. Like I still wouldn't pay that. But she very easily makes that. So she is the individual in a modern age where technology enables her to find clients easily. She can make double what a company could afford to pay her. So why the fuck would she ever work for a company? And the answer to that question historically has been security, like job security and healthcare benefits. There are more and more companies that are offering healthcare to freelancers, so that's being solved. And security, with the internet making it so easy for supply to find demand, there are people that need design, demand, and there are designers, supply, and they can find each other more easily. I can find great Thai food and have it delivered to my door very easily. I can find a car that will drive me where I want to go very easily. I can find a place to stay in Paris very easily. These are Airbnb, Uber, Spotify, Tinder. All of these platforms help you find what you're looking for with tremendous ease. So if you're a worker, you can find work very easily. If you're a company and you need work on a contract basis, you can find workers very easily. And so the security that a job brings that you work for 10 or 15 or 20 years isn't necessary anymore. Like there's security in the internet. So the future of work is that if you have a marketable talent, you can charge 75, 100, 125, 150 bucks an hour. When I consult, I charge 150 bucks an hour to be a marketer. That's 300 grand a year. So I pay myself almost nothing through the company. I could kill my company tomorrow and make 300K a year. I'm highly confident just being a marketer and finding clients and consulting. And it's like, if you know what you're doing, quite easy to set that up. So it's sort of an entitled thing. It only applies to people with certain skill sets, but you're a writer, Ella. If you're a writer, if you're a designer, if you're an animator, if you're a photographer, if you're a driver, if you're a nanny, there are ways for you to find business and not need some institution to pay you a consistent paycheck.
To circle it back to something you mentioned about how 1 in 3, and as you posited, potentially 1 in 2 people are contractors now. Do you see that being a benefit to the workforce? Are there potential downsides? Does that democratization of work, make companies more at risk because they don't have that kind of loyalty? Like if you can just walk me through this evolution as we're seeing it in real time.
Yes. It will have dramatic impact on companies of old. Like many of them will die because of this exact fact. Like I, as an employer, have so much less power than I would have in the past. Because people don't need me. Like people put up with a lot of abuse. My sister worked at a big investment bank for a while and was miserable, but didn't leave, because she's, my parents, I guess, trained us to, as their generation was trained, right? Like you're lucky to have a job, like your boss is your boss. Like, but I already see it in my youngest employees and interns. Like there's a negative take on it would be entitlement. A positive take on it would be self-actualization and confidence. But there's sort of this attitude of like, it would be easy for me to find another job. So I don't need to put up with bullshit. I don't need to be unhappy at work anymore. So employees can be entitled. They can say, I don't need to be here. Like, pay me more, give me more benefits, make my life better. Like, have a vision, have a mission that I really align with. And as a function of that, companies lose power. They have to pay employees more. They have to give employees more. They have to have more defensible missions. And so companies are going to be forced to evolve very quickly. And those that can't will die because all the talent will go elsewhere or work for themselves.
And then you also mentioned, if you were to quit the hub tomorrow and start offering your own marketing services, and how would you stand that up? Like, what would be the steps you would take if you actually decided tomorrow to do that?
Yeah, so I really, really believe in the hub deeply, and I want to see it through to its bitter end, whatever that may mean. Hopefully success, but maybe failure, and it's going to take a year, 2, 3, 4 more to get there, maybe longer. One of the ways the hub makes money right now is that I consult. It's one of the ways that we just bring in like a decent amount of cash, is that I have 3 or 4 clients at a given time and bring in $15,000, $20,000 a month in revenue for the company. So I'm doing it for the hub, but I'm also standing up a personal brand. And what I like about that is, if God forbid the hub fails in a year and I don't have that as an option anymore, I'm not starting from ground zero building a consultancy. I have a company that's ready, and all I have to do is put the keys in the ignition, and it can make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Like, I have a career waiting for me. It's my escape pod, and it's part of my business model right now, but I can break that off and have that as another business that's completely separate from my larger hub business. And the way I've stood it up is, you need a holding vessel, like historically, I guess that was like a resume, maybe would probably be the best, like your CV, your resume, like a single piece of paper that lists all the shit you've done, the schools you went to, the extracurriculars you do, the other jobs you've held, what you did at those jobs. It's like one place that very conveniently people can see like everything that is Ella Cerrone and like what you have accomplished professionally. I think like a website's probably the best version of that now. I'm sure there'll be better things as time goes on, as the future of work really evolves. But right now, I think having a personal website that really showcases who you are, what you offer. So I have a website that describes what I do. I have a website that has case studies and testimonials from previous clients. It has a logo wall of all the brands that I've consulted for. And it's just a way to sort of legitimize myself. Like, look at all the impressive shit I've done. And the more legitimate I can make that, the more I can send people to that as if it were a digital resume, and they'll be impressed and want to work with me. So it increases the percent chance that someone converts from considering working with me to working with me. And then the next step is having more people hit that page. So if 2 people look at it and I convert 50%, I'll get 1 client, which isn't enough to pay the bills. But if I have 10 people look at it, or 20 or 100, then I have way more options. So I had the benefit through the hub of having thousands of email addresses of brands. And a couple months ago, I emailed 7,000 brands and I got 42 sales calls for my consulting business that I was just starting. And from those 42 sales calls, I have 4 clients. So the funnel is pretty devastating. I think that's something that people miss in anything, dating, work, we all know this, right? Like, if you use Tinder, it sounds crass, but like, you can swipe right on 100 people and maybe go on a date with 6 of them and maybe actually like 2 of them. And it's like a pretty staggering attrition rate. So maybe you swipe right on 100, you start chatting with 26 of them, you go on a date with 6 of them, you actually like 2. So you go on a second or third or fourth date, and maybe one of them becomes your significant other. But it's like a pretty, it's the same thing with getting clients. Like, you need to start with hundreds or ideally thousands of brands that you reach out to, so that some of them will consider booking some time with you, so that some of them will get on the phone with you, so that some of them will convert. And I say, as a safe rule of thumb, that you lose a 0 every step. So if you email 1,000 brands, 100 will consider you, 10 will get on the phone, and you'll get 1 client. That's conservative. And so, as I said, I got on the phone with 42 and I had 4 clients. So I guess that's accurate. That's losing a 0. I emailed 7,000 to have maybe 700 consider, 42 get on the phone, and 4 actually become my client.
To bring it back though, being able to email people and having these email lists is in some ways a luxury. A lot of people might be starting from 0 or not even knowing where to start and where to even, like, who to even reach out to. So if somebody is starting from what they perceive to be scratch, how would you suggest they get going?
If they have a sense of who their target audience is, like who would want to hire them, right? Like you're a writer, Ella, and you write in this, like about a certain type of thing predominantly, and like there's certain, so you could go onto Upwork today. Like let's just say I was helping you launch your own personal like Ella Cerrone brand, and you were starting from scratch, as you say, like you had nothing. We'd make a website. You've worked for Teen Vogue. You've worked for who else?
I'd rather not be the example if that's okay.
Okay, got it. So let's say there's a designer and I'm helping her, right? And she's worked for 3 or 4 impressive brands and she's worked at an impressive design firm and whatever. So we make a website and she has all the impressive shit she's done. And let's say that she really wants to do branding design for food and beverage companies. We go into Upwork. We find Upworkers internationally in countries that have lower wages, in countries where people make $2 an hour working. We pay them $4 an hour. So we find people in Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, China on Upwork that have high ratings for $4 an hour. And we find 4 of them. And we brief them all in and we say, hey, we're looking for brands that have 1 to 20 employees that are food and beverage brands. And I need a first name, an email address, and the name of the company. And you send them the spreadsheet to fill out. And then you let the 4 of them go, maybe for 20 hours without checking in. $4 an hour, so $80 times 4, that's $320. So you spend $320, and that $320 should get you several thousand leads, several thousand names. Rebecca Jones at foodbrand.com. That's her email address. And, the food brand is some pretzel company. So now you have 2,000 email addresses of 2,000 people.
What's the benefit for targeting very small companies with 1 to 20 employees?
I said that arbitrarily, although I guess I would choose that just because you're getting to a decision maker faster. So bigger companies ostensibly have bigger budgets, but bigger companies have probably solved this problem already. Like once again, like we're transitioning, right? So if you're a big company, you probably have a designer on your payroll. You don't need a contractor designer. If you do need a contractor designer, you probably have processes you go through to find said designer. You like have friends of friends or contacts or recruiters or means that you use. It's not like a cold email in your inbox is going to make you go, maybe we should consider Jessica, the designer. So small companies have a need. They do not have a designer on retainer. They don't know how to find her. And if you email enough of them and say, hey, I'm a really talented designer, I love your brand and I want to work for you, you can get yourself some phone calls with brands that have that need. And that process, you use what's called a mail merger software. You have to be careful because getting emails in this way is technically illegal, isn't really the right word, but it's sort of, tenuous, getting emails without people's consent. So if I got Rebecca Jones's email at the food company and she didn't opt in to receiving emails from me, emailing her is technically wiggly. Sort of depends how you do it and what other rules you follow and so on. The Canned Spam Act of 2003 is what lays out these rules if you want to read about it or if someone wants to read about it. but everyone does it, you know. If you're only sending a couple thousand emails, it's not really of concern. So you can download, like there's something called Streak, which integrates with your Gmail. I think you can only send 1,000 emails a day. So it might take a couple days to send out all your emails. But in Streak, you upload a spreadsheet, first name, email address, company. And then in Streak, they have these things called merge tags. So you can say, hi, first name. My name is Jessica. I'm a designer. I absolutely love brand. I've been following you guys for a couple of years. I'd love to talk about potentially doing some design work. I've worked for Allbirds, Recess, and so. I used to work at this fancy design firm. You know, here's some nice things clients said about me. You know, here's my schedule. Book some time if you're interested. And then when the emails get sent, it will look up on your spreadsheet and fill in the name field with Rebecca, Josephine, Peter, Stephanie, Frank. So hi, Frank. Hi, Stephanie. Hi, Josephine. It'll say, I really love brand. I really love Allbirds. I really love whatever. So when you're emailing 1,000 people, it can seem very personal, even though in fact it's not. You're sending one email blast out to 1,000 people at the same time. And again, that might be just to get 10 phone calls, 1,000 emails, 10 phone calls. And then from those 10 phone calls, maybe you get a client or 2 or 3. And that's it. And you can rinse and repeat that process. Ideally get a couple clients, over deliver for them, do an amazing job, kill yourself, give them way more value than they deserve. I think a lot of people want to prove their value early out of insecurity or selfishness. Sorry, not prove their value, capture their value early. You know, they want to be paid what they're worth, and I don't want to work more than I said I was going to, and so on. My advice would be to work double the hours that you said you were going to and bill for. So if you say, I'm going to work 20 hours, work 40 and bill for 20. And the reason why is because your initial clients are your lifeblood. Like the easiest way to grow is word of mouth. So if you crush it for your first 3 clients and 2 of them tell their friends, like you'll grow your business. And you can keep doing the cold email funnel I described to get a couple new clients. But ideally you have retention, like clients that stick around and want you around for 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, and they're telling their friends about you. So a lot of the consultants that I know, whether they're designers or writers or animators or photographers, they have clients that are consistent that they work with for 6 months or a year or 2 or 3. And they grow their business primarily through word of mouth. So once you have your initial 3 to 5 clients, if you're good at what you do and you work hard, you should have a self-sustaining business that grows itself.
We've previously talked about the sales funnel in terms of Facebook ads and a tangible product. Is there a benefit to kind of viewing yourself in those same kind of parameters that you yourself are a product as well?
Yes, you're absolutely a product. Like, what are you? What do you offer? What makes you different? Like the tighter that story can be, the more like you can tighten your value proposition, the better at the bottom of the funnel. And then same thing at the top of the funnel, like what do people want to read? So we're talking about an email funnel right now. So like the top of the funnel is the email, or really like the subject line is the top. The subject line will indicate the open rate. 20% open rate is good. You know, if you do a good job, you can get 30% open rates. And that's a big difference, because if you send it to 1,000 people and 300 people open it, that's way better than 200 people opening it. So it starts with your subject line. It starts with your email and what you say and how you say it. It starts with your website and how compelling it is. Every step of the funnel matters. So it's the same thing with a Facebook ad. A Facebook ad is the ad that leads to the website. An email funnel is an email that leads to a website. An Instagram DM funnel is DMing people on Instagram, which ostensibly leads to something like a website. So you have a top and a bottom of the funnel. So viewing yourself as a product, just as I would this chameleon cold brew that I'm drinking. Like, what is it? What's likable about it? Why should people buy it? How can the website express that? And then how can the top of my funnel, be it an email or a Facebook ad or whatever it is, also express that eloquently to get people in? Then they read the website, which confirms what compelled them in the first place in the ad or email. And then they actually buy the product or hire you if you're the product.
That process gets a little sticky, possibly, when we're talking about people, because people tend to have a very ingrained sense of self and who they are. And as we've previously discussed, a lot of your product does need to be malleable to get other people's attention, because you're kind of reflecting on what you think they want, or what the algorithms are telling you that they want. So what advice would you have for somebody who is kind of wrestling with this ego check or this self-adjustment in terms of marketing themselves in that way?
It's a great question, and it's sort of like what the future of work's all about. You can go full capitalist, or you can go full fuck the world, I do exactly what I want. And I know people that do both. So just take me, I'll use myself as an example. Like, I charge $150 an hour. If I work 40 hours a week, that's 300 grand a year. If I work 80 hours a week, that's 600 grand a year. So I could go full capitalist. Like, I will say yes to anyone, any project. I'm going to work 80 hours a week. I'll have 8 clients. I'm going to make $600,000 this year. Like, that's so much money. Or I could be like, I'm single, but I want to spend time with my wife, or I want to spend time with my kids, or I want to spend time in nature, or I want to spend time with my hobbies, or I only want to work with brands that align to my value structure, brands that are like doing good for the world. So then you're turning down a lot of brands, then you're advertising yourself in a way that might turn off brands. I only work with this kind of brand. I only work in this way. I only work these hours. Sometimes I take 2 weeks off so I can go on vacations with my wife. These are things that will turn people off. So you won't get as much business, but you have freedom. You can not work for a couple weeks. You can only work with coffee brands. You can only work with organic brands. You can only work with female founded brands, whatever you care about. So in some ways it makes it harder because you're limiting the funnel. You're limiting the number of people who might have interest in you, but you probably feel more connected to your work. So it's just a spectrum. So some people, when they go into the future of work, they're like, I'm going to do this to make 5x more money than I would have made at a company. And some people are doing it because they don't like the fact that working for a big company means they have to give up their sovereignty. They have to give up what they care about. They have to do what their boss says. Like, when I worked in big advertising, I worked for like Hillshire Farms lunch meat, Ballpark hot dogs, like brands that I do not eat, I do not like, I do not think people should eat because I think they're unhealthy and bad for you. It's kind of hard to go into work every day and like market a product that you kind of fundamentally don't want people to be eating, right? Like, that's kind of fucked up. So in theory, if I'd had the training, the ability, the self-confidence, and the courage, I could have left and been like, I'm going to use my marketing talents to only market products that I believe in. But then you risk making less money. You risk alienating brands that would pay you more. So it's a push and pull of, what do you care more about, money or your values? And you can pick wherever you want to live in that spectrum.
That goes along with a theory that I've heard from a number of colleagues or other freelancers, just on some sort of formula that like 40% of what you do is for your heart and 60% is for your stomach, or in layman's terms, to pay the bills. Or I've heard it flipped the other way. Is there a formula that you try to align with?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's a little different for me. I'm not a freelancer, right? Like, I run a company. There are other people that depend on me. There's like more at stake here than like me making a little less money one month or something like that. So I probably skew a little bit more like capitalist or like stomach than heart than I'd like right now. Like, there's of course a big element of heart. I have a vision and I have something I believe in my company that I'm really chasing and working hard for. But I have to keep the company alive lest it fail. And 8 people lose their jobs. And I lose my dream and so on. So yeah, it's a give and take. I think as a freelancer, it's the same give and take. Like, you need to pay the bills. You need to be able to afford the lifestyle that you want or need. I think if you get good enough and you pick a lane, like if you were to say, I do marketing for organic food and beverage brands only, and you're very specific and you do a good job and word spreads within that like the smaller the community, if there are only 50 brands or 100 brands that match the description of who I want to work with, maybe it's like organic coffee brands or something. Like, if it gets too small, then they're all competitors and they won't spread the word. So I guess that doesn't work. But the idea is that it's small enough where you quite quickly like become a name that these people have heard of. If there are 100 or 200 or 500 brands that sort of match the description of what you're going for, a very specific size, a very specific industry, a very specific, thing, your case studies will be very relevant to everyone you're pitching. It's not like they have to close their eyes and be like, how does this relate to me? It's like, oh, well, this is basically my company, just like slightly different. Like this is an organic cracker brand and I'm an organic cereal brand. And like, I can very much see the connection of like what James was able to do. So if you get very tight around your heart and you get very good at doing work that aligns to your heart, in theory, you could get pretty close to 100% heart, 0% stomach. That would be my hope for like most freelancers in the coming years.
Yeah, and I was just going to ask a follow up, but like, are there benefits of drawbacks? Obviously, I can imagine that heart, a benefit would be that you just aren't as likely, though there's always the risk to get burnt out just because you are emotionally invested in something. Whereas if you lean more towards stomach, you're obviously probably going to be more likely to pay your bills. So, but are there drawbacks on either? Are there, benefits to both? Just kind of walking me through that.
Yeah, I'd actually disagree. I mean, I think the more heart is in the formula, the less you burn out because the more connected you are to what you're doing. You're right insofar as like connecting to what you're doing can be exhausting in some respects, but hopefully it's filling. And I go through phases. Like my job at times really exhausts me because I'm very emotionally involved. But most times I feel like the more I put in, the more I get out in terms of energy and like fulfillment. I think, not everyone thinks that if they do what they love or if there are no rules that it gets easy all of a sudden. But, for anyone that's tried to make a hobby a profession, it can sometimes suck the love out of it. Right. So like photography for me, like I've done photography pretty seriously at times. It's something I really enjoy. It's like a hobby. But when I try to make it too professionally, it starts becoming work and I don't enjoy it as much. So I think some people like, you asked me in one of our other videos, like, do you have to love your job? And now you're asking me sort of like, is there a benefit to the job being a place where you're just capitalist and trying to make money and then maybe like getting enjoyment from other areas of your life as opposed to your job being something that really makes your heart swell? And I think like if you bring things that you really love into your vocational space, there's a chance that you sort of bastardize those things and your love of them gets jaded or harmed in some way. So that, I guess that would be a risk, that if you do what you love for 80 hours a week and it's intense and it's also how you pay the bills, it's mixing business and pleasure in a way that can be sort of unnatural. There's no job that I know of or that I've experienced where there isn't bitch work, where there isn't stuff that you hate, where there isn't aspects to work where you feel frustrated or detached or less like, even if you're like doing what you love, like I'm bringing photographers work and they do what they love. Like they're a photographer. They're very connected to their craft, but there's a lot of being a photographer that isn't shooting photos and being creative. There's a lot of like going to the store and buying groceries, or doing the dishes after you set up a food shoot, or like without the hub, you know, you have to sell into brands, you have to negotiate with brands, you have to invoice brands, you have to chase them down when they don't pay you on time. And so even when you're doing what you love, maybe 40 or 50 or 60% of it is like sort of soulless work that you have to do to be able to spend hours every week actually within what you love, doing the thing that you actually love, which is taking pictures, right? But like, to be a professional, there are a lot of things like sending emails and logistics and negotiating, and that like isn't actually the thing. Does that make sense?
It does. And I'm curious too, in your just history of observing other people as they kind of stand up their own consulting businesses or whatever we want to call it, what are some of the mistakes is the first half of this question, and also what are some tangible ways that people can fix these very common mistakes?
I mean, I've mentioned two of them already, but I'll repeat them because I think they're probably the two most common. One is not understanding how funnels work. So like, you know, everyone, when they make this leap, there's some insecurity. There's some like fear, like, wait, am I actually good enough? Like, I've been working for like this big company for a long time, and they like tell me that I'm good and I get reviews from my boss and stuff. But like when I go into the open market all by my lonesome, will I get laughed at? Will I be good enough? There's fear, right? There's imposter syndrome. So the best way to let that fear win is to reach out to like 8 would-be clients and get 0 of them, and to be like, I knew it, I suck. It's like, well, no, it's just like it's a funnel. Like you need to reach out to 1,000 people if you want a client for sure. So playing the numbers and falling in love with like what a funnel is, and understanding that if you want to be guaranteed one client, you need to reach out to 1,000 people. You will get a client if you reach out to 1,000 people. So that's mistake one. It's just not understanding how funnels work. And then mistake two is trying to, out of insecurity, extract your value from your first clients. Like building a business like this is all about investing in the business and investing in yourself. Like you need good case studies, you need good testimonials, you need good reviews. Like you need your clients to really love you so that you can get more clients, so you can get more clients. And at some point you can harvest some of that value that you've been growing on the trees, like as they've ripened. But if you pick the fruit before it's ripe, like it's not as good, right? Like it's just not like it doesn't have the chance to get bigger and bigger and bigger on the tree. So I think a mistake a lot of people make is they get their first 2 or 3 clients and they're like, I said 20 hours and this is my rate. And they like get in fights with clients. They piss off their first couple clients. Those clients don't recommend them to anyone else. And then they have to start completely over. So what you want to do is be okay overworking. Make sure that you provide an inordinate, undeniable amount of value to your first 3, 5, 10 clients, who will then recommend you to more people and more people and more people. And at a certain point, you'll have 30 people that want to work with you, and you can only work with 12 at a time or 4 at a time or whatever it is. And then you can be more picky, and then you can fire clients, and then you can really hold them to what the contract says. And you have to earn the right to be sort of entitled and irreverent. Like you have to earn the right to do that. So I think a lot of people, mostly out of insecurity that masquerades as confidence, but it's fear, I think, that drives it for most people, are like, this is what I'm worth, fuck you. No, like the first 5 to 10 clients, though they're paying you money, they're bait. Like, don't get it twisted. Like they are proof of concept. They're not the main event. The main event is when you have a line out the door and you have real freedom because you can say no to people.
Somebody, let's say, has, other life obligations, like let's say they have kids or they're still part-time at their other job and they just don't have that extra allotment of time to provide double the hours without pay to one of these clients. Would you recommend that they take on fewer clients? What would you recommend they do to kind of mitigate that loss of time.
Yeah, I mean, what we're saying, right, is that the hourly rate you can charge is, for rough math, double what you were getting paid at your old job. If you're like a senior person at an ad agency, like you're 34 years old and you're like doing pretty well, thank you very much, you're making like 130K, you know? Let's just say 100K for easy math. 100K is $50 an hour. So the agency bills you out at $400 an hour, $500 an hour to their clients. Like, this is how law firms work. They bill you out at $700 an hour to your clients, and then they pay you $200 an hour. At ad agencies, it's usually about 4x. So they pay you $50 an hour and they bill you out at 200, let's say. So the market is paying $200 an hour for your expertise, and you're getting paid $50 an hour for that expertise. So I'm telling you, you can leave the company tomorrow and charge $100 an hour with confidence, because you've been priced at 200 by the market, maybe even 150 if you want to swing for the fences. So you can technically bring in double the money. If you're going to work twice as many hours as you bill for, work 40 hours a week and bill for 20. But you're getting paid twice as much. So the 20 hours that you work will pay the same as the 40 hours that you were working before in the beginning. So you're not losing any money.
You've been standing up your own clients and businesses. Has there been anything that you've learned from other people that really made you think about how you were going about it differently?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's been one of my favorite parts of consulting, is that I parachute into totally different businesses. And I marvel simultaneously at the similarities, how like a business that sells yoga pants or that sells Ayurvedic supplements or a marketplace for photographers, that they have so much in common, and so much of what I've learned is translatable. That's cool, amazing, interesting, and also very validating. Like, I've learned a skill set that actually is relevant to almost any room. Like, that's so cool. But then I marvel at, like, I have a client right now whose supply chain got disrupted by COVID stuff, and she's out of product. And we need to hit numbers for investors, and we're having to like sell product we don't have. And I've never dealt with a physical product with my company, like literally ingredients not showing up because like a vendor shits the bed, or the manufacturer has a COVID breakout and needs to shut down for 4 weeks, or like, these are things that happen in the real world that I'm not having to deal with in my business. So learning about supply chains, learning about disruptions to supply chains, learning about inventory, learning about cash flow problems. Like, these are things that I don't really have to worry about. So they're totally new challenges. I was working for a company in the hospitality space, and I called one of my best friends who works in the hospitality space and had him spend 4 hours over a weekend teaching me everything about how hotels work. And I knew nothing. It was fascinating to learn, like in New York City, for a hotel to be profitable, they need 93% occupancy. Like, that's crazy. They need to like almost always be sold out. And if they're at 70% occupancy for more than like a couple of days out of the month, they'll go out of business. Like, holy shit. Like, I was looking at P&Ls for hotels that I'd been to that he provided for me confidentially, and looking and seeing like, oh my gosh, like, I've stayed in hotels before, but I'd never stopped to really think about the business. Most restaurants and hotels lose money. They just exist to provide a service to the people that are staying there. Like, things like that, I just had no idea. So I've learned an obscene amount about all kinds of different business models.
To take all of this information just one step further, is there anything about everything that you've learned that has impacted the way that you market yourself or your consulting personally?
Not particularly, but it's given me more confidence that I can like parachute into almost any situation and add value. Like, the more looks I get, the more reps I get, the more, I work for a yoga pant company and an Ayurvedic thing and all these different things. Like, either I prove to myself the first time when I work with them that I know what I'm doing, and that gives me more confidence, or I learn that I don't know what I'm doing but I learn. Like I'm like, okay, now I understand supply chains. So every day I'm getting a little better. And that just makes me more confident when I sell myself that I actually, there's not um, vaporware, as it's called in startup land. Like it's not smoke and mirrors. It's not me faking it till I make it. I actually have something to say. I have something to add. Right. So in a sales call, like, dating, people say that the opposite sex can like smell doubt or fear or insecurity on you. Like if you go onto a date and you really don't love yourself, or you're anxious or not so sure, that like people, or at least empathic people, can pick up on that in a job interview, in any situation where there's a would-be power dynamic and you want the other person to like you very acutely. If you don't believe in your ability or what you're bringing to the table, that's pretty palpable to the other party, and the date will go less well. The job interview will go less well. So me just getting more experience and more clients and proving to myself over many, 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 many reps that like, okay, I can do it. Like, I actually understand this stuff, gives me the confidence to then go out and sell. And when I'm selling to someone, I can be very even keeled and just be like, I really think I can bring you value, and here's how. And I did it for these companies. And it's not me with imposter syndrome saying, I can really crush this for you. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, I almost hope they don't pick me, because if they do, I'm going to have to put up, and I can't put up. Like, I actually don't know what I'm doing. I'm terrified. Like, they pick up on that and you don't get the gig, or they give you the gig and like the first month or two, you're like all anxious and insecure. Right. And like, we've all been there. I certainly have. So I think the main thing that I've brought into like how I market myself is just that I have a calm confidence, as opposed to an insecure freneticism, which is how I started my consulting practice.
And then one last question for you, but as we mentioned, the funnel tends to get really, really small. And for somebody who might be just really nervous at the outset, that can be kind of demoralizing, whether they're getting out actual no's or they're just getting no responses. And so what advice would you have for them to keep that confidence or to brush off just the rejection?
I think you just have to um, view it as a macro process, and not zoom into every interaction and have each interaction be an indictment on your ability. Right. Like in dating, like if every date was like, am I lovable? Am I worthy of being loved? If every client call is like, am I good at my job? You get mostly no's. So you can't let that fuck with you. Hall of Fame baseball players put 3 out of 10 balls in play. 7 out of 10 balls, they either strike out or ground out or like lose 7 out of 10 times. That's the Hall of Fame. That's the best of the best of the best. The best of all time put 4 out of 5 in play, 4 out of 10 in play. So, if you're a baseball player and you walk up to the plate and let that beat you, that like there's a 70% chance that I'm going to ground out, strike out, fly out, fuck up, then you don't trust your swing and you're never going to hit the 3 out of 10. So baseball players just know that the odds are stacked against them. Entrepreneurs know the odds are stacked against them. Like, you have to know that the funnel is stacked against you. And if you know this like 1,000, 110, 1 rule, that I'm going to have to reach out to 1,000 people to definitely get a client. And if I don't get a client after sending 1,000 emails, then maybe, start worrying a little bit, like, or not worrying, but just maybe I'm emailing the wrong people or the wrong messaging, or maybe I'm positioning myself the wrong way. But you have to view it as like a macro process, and the win or the loss or the demoralization or the validation comes from the 1,000 to 1, not from the 1 to 1. Because 999 of the 1,000 people won't get back to you or will say no. And that's just the reality of it.
Is there anything else about this process of kind of venturing out and creating your own client thing that we didn't touch on that you would want people to keep in mind?
I just think people should consider it more. I think it's like, what am I good at? Not everyone has a marketable skill set. They kind of have a generic skill set, or they've like been working at a big company doing like a broad spectrum of things, but sharpening your skill set into something that's marketable. And then I really do think in 10, 20, 30 years, like this is what the vast majority of the workforce will be doing. Like there will be talent and there will be companies or entities that need talent, and they'll find each other just like drivers and passengers find each other on Uber, or travelers and hosts find each other on Airbnb, or, you know, two people find each other on Tinder. Like that supply and demand efficiency hasn't happened in the job market yet, but it's going to. So I would just say like try to pay attention to what skill you can bring to the world, sharpen the story on that, and participate in this ecosystem, because I think you have more freedom that way.
Cool. Well, we're just at about time. So thank you so much for your insight, as always.
Thank you.
Cool.
Good to talk to you, Ella.
See you Friday.
Yep.